In Lesson 5, we are continuing designing the customer table. We're going to decide whether or not certain fields need to be text or number, like phone number, for example. Are we going to store that as a text or as number? We'll see the difference between long integers and doubles, why we want to use an ID field, an auto number field, how to move fields around inside the table, saving your table, of course, table naming conventions, and we'll talk about primary keys and indexing. Continuing on with our customer table, everything we've added so far has been a text field, specifically a short text field. Let's add some other stuff that's not text. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. You can add a whole bunch of stuff to one table. You can have lots and lots of fields. Now, I've seen people send me databases with 100 fields in them. You shouldn't have to go that much. If you start getting over like 50, 60 fields, then you might want to start thinking about breaking that down into multiple tables. And we'll cover that more when we get into future classes. But don't try to put too much stuff in one table. I would say, speaking from experience, most tables that I've built have somewhere between 10 and 20 fields in them. You start getting up over 100 fields, and you really want to start considering a second table. We'll talk a lot more about multiple tables working together with relationships in Access Expert Level 1. I'll put a link to that down below if you want to learn how to do it now. The upward limit, the maximum limit, is 255 fields in a table, but you should never get anywhere near that close. Let's put in this customer's website. That'll be a hyperlink field. Like I said before, if you want to capture their email, make that short text. Okay, trust me on that one. How about the person's phone number? All right, phone. Now, you'd think you'd want to use a number for this, but I'm going to go with short text. Remember the way you tell the difference, right? Are you ever going to be adding up a column of phone numbers or calculating the average phone number? No. So store it as text. Now, if you want to do home phone, work phone, cell phone, I'll allow it. Generally, I say if you got multiple bits of information, store them in a second table. But if it's just 2, 3 at the most, you could do home phone, work phone, cell phone. All right, billing address, shipping address, that's fine. For class, we're just going to store the one phone number. Since I actually made a slide for this when I did the Access 2013 version, I'll put it here for you too. Calculations, right? Need to find the sum or an average, use a number. Otherwise, use text. All right, drive that point home. Ever going to add 2 phone numbers together? No. Store it as text. Do you ever think you're going to want to find the customer with the greatest number of children? Yeah, you might. Or the average number of children for all of your customers if you sell, let's say, kids' clothes. Okay, those are fields that you might want to store as numbers. Another thing to take into consideration is the sort order. Now, numbers obviously are sorted numerically, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on. That's numerically. That's a numeric sort. Text values are sorted alphanumerically, and they're sorted by the character placement. So, for example, all the text fields that start with 1 will come before all of the text fields that start with 2. So it's going to go 1, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then after all those, then you're going to get 2, 20, 25, okay? So it's a totally different sort whether you've got it based on numbers or text. That's why if you're doing like a lot of mailings, for example, you might want to split out the house number from the street name, okay? Because that way you can sort all the stuff on the same street together and then put them in order based on the street number, which should roughly put them in the order for delivery, for example. If you store them together, right, 1 Main Street will come right next to 1 Park Avenue. So that's something to take into consideration when you're figuring out what fields to put in your database. Here's another one, leading zeros. All right, some things that are called numbers, like Social Security number, even though it's a number, we're going to store it as text. Right, that leading 0 is important. Yes, you could store it as a number and still display it with a leading 0, like the zip code, for example. It's a 5-digit number. All right, but we want to always have that leading 0 there. It's just easier to deal with it as text, trust me. Plus, if you're dealing with Canada or some other countries that have a postal code that accepts letters as well, then you could still use your zip code field for those countries. And as a preview, we're going to store only the characters, not those dashes, because you can format the number however you want to. Another thing to consider, is it always a number? Right? If you got a phone number field stored as a number, and once in a while you might get something thrown at you that's got letters in it, like 1-800-DRUIDIA, right? Or 1-800-FLOWERS, or someone gives you... I remember back in the day, my grandma used to have a phone number that they still use letters in the phone numbers. All right, you don't really see that often anymore unless it's a business number, like an 800 number, but it can still happen. Next, how about the company name? And that'll also be short text. Let's say PC Resale does a lot of business with companies, right? A lot of business to business. Now, I'd like to keep that company name up with the person's name. So how do I move these fields around? Well, it doesn't really matter internally as far as Access is concerned, but you can move these fields up and down. Watch this. Click right there. That'll select that row. Let your mouse go. Take your finger off the button. Right? Now, click on that same spot and then drag it up. See how that line's moving right there? Drag it wherever you want it and drop it, like, let's say, right there. All right, see that? Like zip code, for example. Click on it, click, drag, drop. See? I didn't want to do that, though, so let's put it back where it was. Okay, see how easy it is to move these things around? First name, last name, company name. Okay, let's come back down here. Let's say at each company, I want to know how many employees they have for marketing purposes, right? How many people you got there? That way I know that if it's a bigger company, they're more likely to buy more computers. Now, I like to start my number fields off with the word num, with the prefix num, N-U-M, so num employee. And I like to keep everything singular. I know it seems kind of weird, but that's just my own personal preference. In fact, if you watch the last version of this class that I did, I was calling this num employees. But since then, that was 2013. So in the past 8 years, I've really come to make sure that I keep all of my field names singular because it bites me. it hurts me a lot. Like on my website, I've got a table called comments T, plural. And every time I'm coding for it, I'm like, okay, look up this from the comment table. And I'm wrong because it's plural in the table. So try to keep everything singular. All right, trust me. Okay, now num employee is going to be a number field. If you put in just employee, well, what is that? The employee ID, the employees, I don't know. Num employee tells me, oh, okay, yeah, number of employees this company has. That makes a little more sense. And I don't want to type out number of every time. So for me, again, this is just one of my naming conventions, num employee. If you're making a database based on family information, you might have num children, for example. Now, this is going to be a number field because I might want to run a query later that says, show me a list of all my customers with more than 50 employees. Or sort this list of customers, everybody from New York with more than 20 employees. All right, sorted by the employee number. Okay? I might say, add up all of the employees that my customers from Pennsylvania have. What's the total number? Now, on the number field down below here, it says field size long integer. Click in there and then drop this box down. You'll see all the different types of numbers that are available. Remember what I said earlier. For now, we're only going to worry about long integers and doubles. That's it. Long integer for counting numbers, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the negatives. Doubles for anything that has a floating point, a decimal. In my more advanced classes, I'll talk about the differences between these number types. For example, integer and long integer, what's the difference? Integers are smaller, okay? They only go up to 32,000 some odd as far as their value goes, okay? Long integers go up to in the billions, okay? However, integers are also smaller as far as the amount of room they take up in the computer's memory. So if you've got lots and lots and lots and lots of numbers, you might want to use an integer. If it's something like, for example, number of employees, you might not have a company that's got 1 billion employees. All right, long integer works, but it takes up more space. These are considerations to worry about later on when you become a database expert. Okay, for now, just think integers for counting numbers, doubles for decimals. Okay, that's all I want you to worry about at this point. What is something you'd use a double for? How about discount rate? All right, that'll be a number of type double because you could put 5.5% in there. In fact, if you look under format, you'll find percent. We'll talk about format. I want to say in a future lesson, but coming up pretty soon. Next, I want to keep track of how long each customer has been a customer, right? And give rewards to people who've been with me for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. I just recently started doing this on my website. I put badges up there. You get a 5-year badge, a 10-year badge, all right, how long you've been a customer. So let's put a field in here, customer since, all right? And that's going to be the date you first became a customer. So let's make that a date time field. Remember, a date time field stores date or time or both together. Let's keep track of each customer's credit limit, how much money they can spend with us. It's a money value. What does that mean? Currency. Currency is a special type of number field that is optimized for storing currency values. And it will use whatever regional settings you've got going on. So if you're in the United States, you get dollars. Okay. Earlier I mentioned a field called is active. Now don't put a question mark on the end of it. Remember, only letters and numbers go in here, okay? This is going to be a yes/no field. Yes or no value. What does that mean, right? Will show up in lists, all right, on mailing list. Okay? Explain what a possibly ambiguous field means by putting something over here in the description field. If you want, you don't have to. Now, pretty much every table I put a notes field in. Pretty much. Almost everyone. That's going to be long text, formerly known as memo. If you hear me talk about something being a memo field, it's a long text field. Pretty much everything I can think of, like customers, orders, products, vendors, all that stuff. You might want to throw some notes in there to explain something about this particular customer. All right? So I put a notes field in just about every table. They won't waste space. A notes field won't use any space unless you put data in there. So it doesn't hurt at all to have a notes field in every table. Now we're going to skip some of these data types for now, like date time extended. That's new. We're going to skip large number. We're going to skip OLE objects and attachments and calculations and lookup wizards and all these things. We'll get to these later on. Some of these I don't use at all, but I'm going to show you how to use them in case you want to. But for now, I think we're just about good with the number of fields we've got in here. Now there is still one bit of information, and it's one of the most important bits of information that we are missing from our table. Can anyone think of what that is? Raise your hand. I swear, I'll see it. I'm just kidding. We're missing a way to uniquely identify each customer. Remember, every customer should have their own ID, right? So that we know that this John Smith is different from that John Smith. So we're going to add a customer ID field to this table. And what are we going to make it? We're going to make it an auto number. All right, right there, auto number. Very important. Now, personally, I like to keep my ID fields up at the top of the table. So I'm going to select that row, let it go, then click and drag and put it at the top. That's just a personal preference, a style, if you will. I keep all of my IDs at the tops of the tables. Auto numbers will start at 1. And Access will keep counting up for you. So the next customer is 2, and 3, and 4, and so on. If you delete someone, like customer 3, that number's gone. Okay? But you don't have to worry about those numbers. Don't use those numbers for anything in real life. Okay? I've recorded whole videos on why you shouldn't rely on auto numbers for real world things. For example, if you're a new company starting out, and you make someone an invoice, and they see on the invoice that their customer number is 7. Now they know you only have 6 other customers. All right, so those are the numbers that we don't want our customers to see. Auto numbers are purely for Access to use internally. You don't use them for things in the real world. Okay? If you want to have a separate customer code, like P3642, that's up to you. And again, I've got whole videos on how to set that kind of stuff up. I'll put a link down below in the links section for my customer code video. Okay, it's a little more advanced, but it shows you how to set up a second field that you can use if you want to give the customer a customer ID, but don't show them the actual customer ID. Pretty much every table that I build is going to have an auto number in it. And again, I've gotten into some arguments with some other developers. I recorded a whole video on why you should use auto numbers. Right? Products will have a product ID, vendors will have a vendor ID, employees will have an employee ID. These auto numbers are used by Access internally to make sure that you have unique records and to create relationships, right? For our customers to orders, for example. Which customer does this order belong to? Well, you look up the customer ID. Okay? I'm going to keep repeating this information because I want your brain to start thinking about auto numbers to make relationships. All right, it's going to be a little while before we get to relationships, but just be thinking about it. The other fields in this table really aren't good for uniquely identifying people. You might have 100 Johns. You might have 6 John Smiths. You could have 3 John Smiths from New York. I've seen some companies use phone number. You could have 2 people with the same phone number. It happens. Not only do you have people that share the same phone number at home, but you get phone numbers that get reassigned, right? Someone moves out of the area and someone else gets their phone number. So an ID field makes it so that internally in the database, you know that this customer is this customer. It can't possibly be someone else. If you've got an old paper system, and I know a lot of you do, you're upgrading from either an old database or you're using Excel spreadsheets or even you're on index cards still, you might have customer codes or some kind of a product ID that you're currently using. That's fine. You can just make another field for that, but still add the auto number for access. Trust me. Auto numbers will never get reused in the system. So if you get 100 customers and you delete customer 62, that 62 will never be reused again. And that's a good thing because you wouldn't want customer 62 to have related records in the database and then they get reassigned to the new 62. Okay? And one of the things that I like to teach is we don't delete records. We just mark them inactive. That's one of the reasons why we have this is active field. If someone, let's say, dies or moves out of the area, all right, don't delete their record. Okay? Just mark them inactive. Then they won't show up in your lists anymore. And we'll talk about this as we go along. Again, if you want to learn more about that, I've got a whole video that I recorded about not deleting records. I'll put a link to that down below too. Okay, now nothing that we've done so far has actually been saved to our database. So let's save this table so we don't lose all of our work. Now right up here in the quick toolbar, you'll see the little floppy disk icon. Remember floppy disks? Who's old enough to remember those, right? So you can click on that floppy disk, or you can see the little tooltip pops up, Control S. That's what I use, Control S for save. It's the same as in Excel and in Word and in pretty much every other program you can think of. Control S to save. It's going to ask you for a table name. What are we going to call this table? Well, what kind of stuff we got in here? Customers, right? So customer, singular, customer, T. I like to end all of my tables in the letter T. All my queries will be Q, all my forms will be F, all my reports will be R. Okay, don't worry about macros and modules. Why? I have good reasons. And a lot of my reasons for things that I do in the beginner classes have to do with when you get to the advanced classes, when we start doing things like SQL and building advanced queries and some Visual Basic. If you know up front that it's a table, you can do things differently versus if it's a query. Okay, so just trust me. Benefit from my 27 plus years of experience teaching Access. All right, end all your tables in a T. You might see some people do this. They might do TBL customer. All right, that's fine too. I just like my way better. All right, so customer T is how I'm going to be doing it. If you're going to be taking my classes, do it the way I do it. All right, things will go easier for you. All right, hit OK. Now, you get this thing up. There is no primary key defined. Although a primary key isn't required, it's highly recommended. A table must have a primary key for you to define a relationship between this table and other tables in the database. Do you want to create a primary key now? Yes, no, or cancel. Now, primary keys are important. A primary key is that one field that uniquely identifies each record. Now, we did add an auto number, so we created the field already that we need to use for our primary key. Okay, we just forgot to tell Access, hey, this is my primary key. There's a button right there that you can click to make that your primary key. The reason why I did it like this, okay, is because personally, I've been using Access for almost 30 years. I always forget to do that. I never remember to click on that primary key button. So I wanted to show you the way that I do it, because you're going to do it the same way, and then you're going to get this thing popping up in your face and be like, what? What's the primary key? Oh, okay, I forgot to click the button. Trust me, it'll happen, okay? So I just save the table, and then when this pops up, I go, yeah, okay. Now, if Access sees an auto number, it will use the auto number as the primary key, because you should make all of your tables have a primary key that's an auto number. That's just my rule for good database design. If Access does not see an auto number in your table, it will add one for you and call it ID. Okay, but try to get in the habit of remembering to add a ID field for each of your tables. What exactly happens is when you make something a primary key, okay, Access will index it, no duplicates. We'll talk about what an indexing is later on. It's very important. It speeds up searches and sorts a lot in your database. Okay? No duplicates means you can't have two of the same thing. Now, you can index other fields. You can index something like phone number if you want to make sure that no two customers have the same phone number. That's certainly possible. Okay? You would not want to index something like last name, because then you could only have one person with the last name Smith. That's bad. That's where you can go indexed, yes, duplicates, okay. We'll talk about indexing. I got a whole separate lesson on indexing. But for now, just keep in mind that the primary key is unique. Okay? Okay, now that we've got everything saved, let's go ahead and close the customer table. And notice it's sitting right over here in our navigation pane. There's the customer T right there. If you want to make more design changes to it, editing the fields and the data types and stuff, right-click on it and go to Design View. That'll open it back up in Design View where we just were. Okay, let's go ahead and close it again. Now, when you're ready to actually add some records to it, put some data in it, you just double-click on it. That opens it up in Data Sheet View, and that's what we're going to do in the next lesson.